Alert and Oriented RN, a podcast for nurses by nurses, where we talk about everything nursing and life. You're going to need some restraints and a bedpan because you don't want to miss this. Let's get Alert and Oriented. What's up, everybody? We are back. This is Alert and Oriented RN, the podcast for nurses by nurses. Took a little bit of a hiatus. Life was absolutely insane for Tori and I, but we are back and we have a big topic to talk about today. But before that, I want to say hello and good to see you to my wonderful co-host and best friend, Tori. Tori, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. I missed you guys so much. As y'all can tell, we are in a little bit different scenery.
A little bit different.
So that's how much has changed. Was we both don't even live in the same areas that we used to.
Nope.
I don't even have that apartment anymore, which is what we used to record in.
Yep.
So now we're in Luke's lovely home. We have this great natural light background. Love this going for us. But missed you, Luke. I know you've been super busy. You moved. You got a new home.
Yep.
Super excited for you. And then August can come soon enough.
It can't come soon enough. It's like I can taste it, but yet it's still so far away. It's like you reach out and it just keeps floating away, but at the same time, like it doesn't go out of sight. I don't know. So just chugging away. It's been crazy. Obviously, work's been crazy.
Yes.
Life's been crazy. But at the same time, both of us have been able to have a little bit of fun and kind of relax at certain times. So I, of course, did not get to take a trip to beautiful Hawaii like you did. But I got to have my own fun and stuff. Me and Caitlin went to Mexico for our anniversary in December and stuff too. So that was a lot of fun.
How many years is this? Y'all been married?
6. That was 6.
Oh,
yeah,
my God,
6 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's so much fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a blast. And so, but yeah, so, I mean, trying to get back into the swing of this. And so if I remember right, I think we start off every episode with a feel good moment.
We do.
And we've had about 3 months in between our last episodes. So there shouldn't be any problem finding one. So Tori, what is your feel good moment?
A feel good moment for me is I have a new little preceptee, little baby nurse who I'm precepting, and he is a brand new nurse, no prior nurse experience at all. And I think we're probably 8 weeks into his orientation right now, and he took basically our entire one-to-one into everything by himself. And I mean, of course, I was there for moral support, watched him do everything. However, he made all the great decisions as, okay, it's time to do this. He prioritized, okay, well, we need to do product instead of do this. He prioritized lines, did everything. I was super proud of him. And he was also teaching another orientee about the ventilator.
Oh, cool.
And I was just like standing there like a proud mom.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's always something to be proud of because like it's hard to teach that critical thinking and that prioritization. Like you try to mimic what you see from your preceptor. And so that's just a reflection on a good teacher. So proud of you for that. But yeah, that's tough, especially only 8 weeks into the ICU with no prior experience. I mean, good for him.
8 weeks in general as a brand new baby nurse.
Yeah.
That sucks. So to be able to already critically think, I'm just super proud of him.
Yeah.
So Luke, I know that a lot's been going on with you. I'm sure it's not going to be hard for you to find a feel-good moment. I'm sure you got a couple, but I'd like to hear your feel-good moment.
Yeah, actually, I have a pretty awesome one that is like super important to me. Makes me feel really good inside, and that is actually in July. I'm going to be a dad.
No way!
Yeah.
And you didn't even tell me.
No, and so baby boy due in July, and literally the only reason you did not know is because me and Caitlin said you have to wait until you have a podcast. Like you have to tell Tori when you're recording the podcast, so you get the video reaction and you get the audio reaction. You have to, and it just every time we tried, it just kept pushing back. I mean, we've only known since about I found out on my birthday. That was actually my birthday present. So I got back from that clinical rotation in Colorado, and that was my birthday gift. So that was super special. But yeah, so that is the only reason you have not found out yet, because Caitlin was like, you have to do it on the podcast. That's your feel good moment.
That's so rude.
So yeah, so super excited, super pumped. But part of the other reason why life has been really, really crazy recently. So just kind of gearing up to that. Thank you so much.
Oh my God.
So, but yeah.
They're going to make the best parents.
Oh, thanks. I hope so. But
that is really exciting.
Yeah.
And then also, not to take away at all from you, because I am so excited for you, Kaylin. I am an aunt. So my brother had his baby. Well, my brother didn't have the baby.
Well,
I know it's 2022,
your sister-in-law,
and we can do some weird shit now. But my sister-in-law gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Her name is Alessandra.
Yay.
So I'm also an auntie.
That's so awesome.
I'm going to go hold her for third time after this
Oh,
podcast.
awesome.
I'm really excited.
Dang, so she's fairly fresh then. Well, yeah, because they were due in January, right? So or February.
They were supposed to be due in April. Well, I mean, it's March 31st now that we're recording. So she was supposed to be due like next week, but they did induce her on Saturday.
Oh, so yeah, real fresh.
Yeah.
Nice.
But they started, I think, Pitocin and everything this past Sunday. Today is it Wednesday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Thursday. This Thursday.
Is it Thursday?
Yeah.
Dang. That's why I gotta have my watch with me at all times.
Dang, night shifters. Figure it out.
But yeah, they induced her Sunday, and she gave birth, I guess, real early Monday morning.
Dang. Well, that's awesome. Well,
really
good.
Excited.
Baby mama doing well, though?
Yeah, she's doing great.
Perfect.
Doing great. Everything's good.
That's great.
Well, I'm excited to follow you on your journey. And
yeah. We'll see. It's gonna be excited. It's due July 20th. So it's like 20th. We're talking if he comes on time, we're less than a month from graduation. So like right now I'm gearing up everything and trying to coordinate stuff to basically kind of be done with for sure all my clinicals by like mid-July. So that way, obviously I'll be at home with, Caitlin and the baby and stuff, but then I'll just have some stuff to finish up, test assignments and everything, but hopefully won't have to travel or be taken to the hospital any extra than I have to or something like that for work or clinical. So, but yeah, a lot of fun. Gosh, super great.
Well, shoot, very so much is going to be happening then around that time.
It's going to be a lot of fun. But anyway, so let's get into the actual episode. And so, because it's a pretty intense topic, we don't shy away from intense conversations and kind of, sharing things, but it's a topic that it rocked the healthcare world for sure. Over the last, couple weeks and everything like that. And that's the Radonda Vaught case that came out of Tennessee. For those not familiar with it, or kind of tuning in for the first time or happen to not be in healthcare and not really in tune with it, what it is, it was a nurse in Tennessee who accidentally gave a wrong medication that ended in a terrible situation where a patient lost their life. So first and foremost, our condolences from Tori and I out to that family of the patient who lost their life. It's terrible. Nobody should ever lose their life, even off of an accident. So our thoughts and prayers are with them and having to relive this difficult time because the actual action took place in 2017. So the pandemic had delayed some things, but yeah, the actual accident, medication administration accident took place in 2017. So we're talking, 5 years ago at this point. But it's pretty heavy. I mean, so before we kind of get into the timeline of things, like, do you have like any initial like thoughts or things or stuff? Like, what was the first thing that kind of like, as soon as you saw that it was coming back on the topic and it was getting rehashed and kind of brought back up? And then secondly, after the verdict came out, what was your initial reaction?
So initially, when I first heard about the situation, I've been an ICU nurse for going on 2 years now. It'll be 2 years in June. And so Vecuronium, Versed, and fentanyl are the first three main ICU medications you learn about because those are our main intubation meds that we use when we intubate a patient. And so very, very familiar with those medications. And so when I had first heard that this nurse killed a patient by administering Vecuronium, I thought, like, first off, for the patient, just like Luke said, the Murphy family, just condolences to them because that's an awful way to die. Awful way to die. She died alone in radiology, paralyzed, unable to breathe. And I can't even imagine. So when I first heard about that right away, just condolences to the patient, their family, because that's a horrible way to die. And for the nurse, I'm thinking, like, how did she do this? And how must she feel right now? Because that's got to be the worst feeling on earth, knowing that you killed a patient, because we all go into healthcare to help people.
Yeah.
Nobody clocks in for their shift thinking that they're going to kill someone that day. And that's the last thing that they want. And so mistakes get made in the hospital quite often. And so that's why process improvement projects happen to prevent that. That's why you have all your safety checks. That's why we have the bracelet scanners. That's why we have medical administration records. All these are safety checks. Pretty much they're put in place because of a previous accident. That's why you write incident reports when things happen, so they can get sent to informatics. People can talk about this, and you're like, okay, how can we make sure this never happens again?
Yeah.
So initially, I was like, how did this nurse do this? Because as an ICU nurse, I know, okay, I have to reconstitute Vecuronium. But Vecuronium comes in a powder.
Yeah.
You have to reconstitute it with sterile water, which makes it like a 1-to-1 concentration. And so to me, I'm like, she has to go through so many steps. And I'm thinking in my head, how did she miss that? In my opinion, I'm like, well, then she clearly either wasn't educated enough. And so maybe I'm like, okay, because she was a float nurse, but then I learned that her home base was neuro ICU. So I'm like, okay, you know, she should have knowledge of these medications. Maybe she was just going through the motion as in the sense that she got complacent, that she's familiar with this medication, pulled it in her head. She's like, okay, I'm just reconstituting becuronium. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I have my preceptee with me. And then she administers it. And in her head, she's like, oh yeah, I'm just giving Versed. But her muscle memory was just for becuronium.
Yeah.
And she doesn't put the 2 and 2 together.
Yeah. So before we go any further, so then like that's a great place. So let's start. So for those of y'all that followed along or even don't, we're just going to rehash. So this December of 2017 is when the incident happens. This patient had come in, had been treated for a pretty life-threatening, event herself, was doing really well and was actually getting kind of worked up to be discharged within the next couple of days. She was a previous cancer patient. She had survived. So her doctors wanted to put her through a PET scan just to kind of basically what it does, just check the body for any evidence of cancer or anything like that, but also at the same time scan her head because what brought her in was the subdural hematoma. Suffered from excruciating claustrophobia, so required some sedation. They had tried to do the scan before that, wasn't working out, which is understandable. So they had called up to the ICU, asked for them to bring down Versed to help her calm down so she could lay still to get the scan done. And so, like you said, came out that Radonda was a float nurse that day. Well, when you actually get into it and you look into it and you understand it, she was part of the resource pool that day. She did have an orientee that she was orienting. So the resource pool they can work in any area of the hospital. So they have a little bit of experience everywhere. And basically, yes, they do float to wherever the need is for that day. But her home base for 2 years was neuro ICU.
Yes.
So should be, like you said, very, very confident and familiar with becuronium, Versed, fentanyl, all of the common medications that you would use to sedate, paralyze any patient. Grabs what she thought was Versed. Turns out to be becuronium. But like you said, you have to reconstitute it. So then you sit here and you're like, where did she go wrong? So then more of the story comes out, right? Turns out that their process there, due to health, technology problems, complications, it was very commonplace for them to have to override medications. Now, both of us and any nurses or healthcare professionals listening understand that that is commonplace, especially in ICUs and emergency rooms, because that's how you have to save somebody's life. You don't always have the time to go step by step through the process that you normally would if somebody is actively dying and you need something to rescue them right there. There are safety protocols put in place for those situations to still be administered them quickly. But however, here, this was apparently commonplace just in general administration of medications because their Pyxis machine, their medication machine, was not working properly.
Right. So they were actually transferring over to Epic at the time. And so they had transferred over to Epic, and apparently they were having a lot of glitches because the physician had put the order in for the 2 milligrams of Versed. And so when she went to go pull up their medication profile in the Pyxis, it should have been on the profile because I think the report came out that it had already been, that the pharmacy had verified the order 2 minutes after the doctor had ordered it. So it should have been on the main profile, no need for an override. Apparently she scrolled through the profile, looked for Versed, did not see it. And so this is when she went and manually overrid the system. And I want to go into that. Anyone who maybe isn't in healthcare, it is not uncommon to override, like you were saying. I don't want to say we override the system all the time because that's not true. But in an emergent situation, you can override the system to pull out a medication to save someone's life if their life is in danger. So say your patient is having a seizure. You call the physician to the bedside. This is a new onset of seizures. They don't have any seizure medications on their profile. And so you're there with the physician and they say, okay, go ahead and administer 2 milligrams of Ativan. So you say, okay, you go to the Pyxis. Ativan is obviously pharmacy hasn't been able to verify that order because it's not put into the system yet. And so you go and you override the system and it says, why are you overriding the system? And there's already like prefixed responses like urgent situation, if delayed will cause patient harm. You can manually type like responses in. And so if you go to pull that Ativan, you just click, okay, like urgent, patients in danger. You know, if you don't administer this drug, it will cause harm. And so you click that and it'll let you pick that medication. And so then you can grab your Ativan, administer it to the patient. The physician is there watching you. You go ahead and verify with another nurse and the physician, this is what I'm giving. Yes, this is the route that I'm giving it. And so the physician will then put that order in. And so you can scan it and say, yes, you do have to scan it later and say, yes, I gave this and this is the reasons why. Mm-hmm. So it's not uncommon to override the system. Yeah. It's not like she hacked the system. It's what I feel like they were making it say.
It was when I tuned into it or whatever. That was definitely what felt like the prosecution was kind of going after. Was like, look what she did. She went around all these safeguards and no, she didn't. Like this was common practice for them because they couldn't get their shit together and get their thing fixed. Now at the same time, it is excruciatingly painful and a long process to switch over different electronic medication record systems. Like it is painful, but at the same time, that there's a responsibility there when it comes from the administration and the actual system itself to put other safeguards or to try to do it in a more timely manner and not have to put their medical professionals in a particular situation like that, where now what is usually an emergent process is now standard routine. And this was apparently standard routine for. Don't quote me on this, but I believe we're talking months, almost to a year, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
So that is way too long of a time to be like, because if you think about it, right, they always tell you 21 days to create a habit. Okay. So within a matter of 3 months for most nurses, it is now standard habit to just override everything because otherwise you can't even pull your routine medications to give to your patients, safe or not. So it's crazy. But with that being said, what I had read and had come out, though, was what was the first mistake that Radonda made that is a mistake of herself is when the Versed did not come up initially, she went to override. She typed in the generic name Versed to find it, VE, which also will bring up Vecuronium, VE. Usually they typed in the trade name. Supposed to search by the generic name as that's how we're taught. You search by the generic because no one medication has the same name. There are still some similarities, but there's not that close. VE for Vec and Versed. And now probably because she had the Orient-T, it was deemed an emergent situation. She was busy that day and everything too. She saw VE, clicked it, boom, dispensed it, grabbed it. Is probably what happened, right? Because she pulled it up on the ICU and was going down to radiology.
And I will say, I don't think I've ever once, the generic name for Versed is midazolam.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever referred to Versed as midazolam.
No, nobody does.
I've never had a physician say, go get 2 milligrams of midazolam, we're going to intubate. Like, no one has ever said that. No. I will be calling it midazolam now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, you're
when
right.
When you go to type in Versed to override it or to just look for it on the patient's profile, you have to type in midazolam.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's just, that's something that maybe we should be doing away with that. Maybe you shouldn't be able to type stuff in anymore. I don't know. But there's got to be something that's got to change now.
And so that day she was essentially just straight resource. She just went wherever they needed her for the day, whether there's transferring patients, helping with medications, relieving nurses for lunch breaks, or anything like that. She did not have an assignment.
Right.
They called her, or the nurse that was in charge of that patient was at lunch. The nurse that was that patient, the nurse that was that other nurse's buddy was watching now, I think 3 or 4 ICU patients, could not go down to radiology safely, leaving those other patients attended. Called Radonda being familiar with this patient from my understanding in the past, I don't know how frequently, whether it was a day, 2, or a week, knew why she was there, knew why she was getting the scan, understood the medication. So absolutely agreed. Yes, I will come up. I'll grab it. I'll take it down to radiology. I'll administer it and I'll help them get through the scan. So that's where it was. So that's a pretty chaotic turn of events, right? So she's basically shuffling all over the hospital.
And she was already headed down to go to ER to do a swallow study.
Exactly.
So she was already en route to go do something else.
Change
and that's
your
what
plan.
That's what Helping Hands will do is it's like, hey, can you go pull formula for me? Hey, can you go grab this for me? Can you take my patient down to radiology? And so she had her preceptee with her, and then she was headed down to go do a swallow study on a different patient when she got that call.
Yeah.
So she's already tunnel vision. I'm doing this. Okay, I think this takes precedent. This person has a lot of anxiety and they're upset and they need this PET scan. So, okay, well, we're going to make a little detour.
Yep.
And so that's how this happened, that she agreed to go take and give Versed to this patient that was not even hers. And it was kind of like a side detour that she wasn't even thinking, okay, like this is what I'm doing right now. So she was just, I think that she was just getting pulled in a few different directions, which happens, but she still felt comfortable to go give that medication.
Yeah. And I mean, and disclaimer here, we're not setting this up to basically create excuses for her. We are just we're highlighting the case, how it is, how it presented, and what the day looked like to bring insight to all of the different areas, the different buckets that sometimes us as nurses or other healthcare professionals have to put our hands into throughout the course of the day to basically make things work and to save lives. So we're not trying to create a narrative of excuses or whatever. Be like, well, look, I mean, it was her responsibility. She knew what her job was that day, and this is what comes with it. So, you still have to take all those safety precautions, but we're only 1 month into the timeline, we're only, a few minutes into this whole situation of what unfolded. And you can already tell, like, wow, I bet you, her mind was probably in 100 different directions.
Right.
Again, no excuse, but just highlighting the things so that when we get into our discussion, it makes a little bit more sense. So obviously the tragedy unfolds. She administers the wrong medication. They call a code blue because the patient immediately goes into cardiac arrest. The paralyzing agent works on the respiratory system too, so the lungs stop. It's not something that you can quickly reverse. And once it's in there, you can't take it back. And unfortunately, no degree of basically interventions is going to reverse that situation without the patient being mechanically ventilated. So we're talking ET tube on a vent, or at least a bag. I mean, bag masking is not going to do anything when vecuronium is floating through your system. You need an ET tube in there, and mechanical ventilation versus bag mask, to be completely honest. So, however, patient loses her life, or I guess they are able to intubate, put her on a vent. They are able to get her back to the ICU because I guess essentially the family was able to come say goodbye, and they withdrew care later that evening. But immediately, Radonda reports her mistake. She admits had what happened. I gave the wrong medication because when she double checked it, she realized she had good vecuronium. She did everything right that you're taught to do as a nurse when you make a mistake. Admit your wrongs, apologize, start the process, filing a report of what happened. Unfortunately, this is the most intense or the biggest thing that could ever happen in a mistake world when it comes to us as nurses is you do something that ends up in the loss of life of your patient. There is nothing above that. But at the same time too, you still, like, even in that moment, know what she had to do. She immediately started to right her wrongs in the way that you can. And that was admitting that she made a mistake, a deadly mistake. She even went and apologized to the family that day, like went to go speak to them and let them know what happened. That couldn't have been easy. And so then now we get into a month later, so the turn of 2018, and the family has come out that they have, forgiven the nurse. Like, they spoke. It's an unfortunate event. They're very sad and stuff like that. But Radonda lost her job at the hospital. But then apparently that was really it.
And then, and Radonda was fired, but she hadn't lost her license.
Yeah. And then it turns out that the hospital system settled with the family in the death suit, which basically is a nice way of saying they kind of just threw some dirt on it, covered it up to try to make it go away before it was a bigger thing than it was.
Right. So they put a gag order on the family as well, the immediate family. So immediate family cannot go out publicly and speak about this, which happens a lot, by the way. That's how a lot of cases like this get settled outside of the hospital is, hey, hush, hush, here's some money. Please don't talk about it. Don't speak ill of our facility. That's it. They fire Radonda. And then she goes and gets a new job at a new medical center. I don't think she's working bedside, but she just gets another job, still has her nursing license, and everything is hunky-dory.
With that being said, though, we're talking 5 months later. So, we don't really know what really happened in those 5 months, but you could probably assume that she probably was not very easy on herself. Based off of what it seemed like of the type of person she was when I saw her on camera and interviews and everything like that. I would imagine that those 4 months before taking that new job were probably miserable. And the new job was probably a way of her just trying to get back into something to take her mind off of literally the worst thing that could ever happen for you as a nurse.
Right.
And so now let's fast forward again another 5 months, talking October of 2018. An anonymous tip comes into the Tennessee Health Board the state health board that, hey, there was an unreported medication error at Vanderbilt University hospital system that resulted in a patient's death, that they just gave the family some money and said, I hope everything's okay, sweet. And that nurse is still currently working in a different facility with an active license. So then the Tennessee Health Board starts to investigate. And this is late 2018 and looking into it and everything like that. Comes out that they decide not to pursue any disciplinary action against Vaught as well, because what we could potentially assume and stuff. And if I got into it, I think they said that did not constitute a violation of the statutes and or rules governing the profession. On the same day, Vaught sent a letter saying the matter did not merit further action. So they kind of basically, in layman's terms, agreed and admitted that what Vanderbilt did was perfectly fine for that situation, and that was good compensation. Everything's fine. Nurse felt bad about it, got penalized by being fired, 4 months off from a job, didn't have it. Family got some money, but they no longer have their loved one. But that's good. We're all good with it. That's done. That's what Tennessee said. Well, that anonymous tipster apparently also sent it to the Center of Medicaid and Medicare Services as well at the same time of the Tennessee board, which everybody knows, like, that is, I mean, everybody talks about JACO and, all this other stuff, but let's get real. Like, Center of Medicaid and Medicare Services say they're going to do something or they're pissed about something, stuff's going to get done because that means they ain't paying you back. Mm-hmm. And that's how most hospitals get funded, right? Is by that reimbursement for Medicare and Medicaid. So they start to conduct their independent investigation, and all of a sudden now they're like, no, hold up. What y'all did, that ain't enough. This is a pretty serious issue, guys. Well, so then that makes Tennessee's state board go back and be like, oh, you're right. No, criminal charges. And they file criminal charges against this nurse a year later from the incident. Criminal charges for an accident. So right there, first time ever.
Right.
That's happened. Be indicted criminally for committing an error. Now, again, at this timeline of events, if we're right there, it's like, that might not be unprecedented because what she did caused the loss of a life. So you're like, well, I mean, other people who kill other people, like, they get charged criminally. Mm-hmm. But it's to be known that, like, that's never happened in the nursing world for an accident.
Right.
Because unfortunately, as much as I hate to admit it, accidents do happen in our job.
Right. And that's why it's important to report them.
Exactly.
That's why the first thing that Radonda did was report what happened.
Mm-hmm. So then the trial starts early 2019. It's going. It's kind of just in that legislation, event, kind of going back and forth, figuring out what's going to do, and then boom, pandemic hits in 2020, and everything gets delayed. And so that's why now all of a sudden, in the last couple of weeks to months, it started to ramp back up again because it finally, now we can get back into court, we can gather, a jury and all this kind of stuff, and they go. And as of at this point, we're at 2 weeks ago now, she was charged and indicted on criminal charges of homicide, facing up to potentially 12 years in prison for the accidental administration of the wrong medication that resulted in the death of Charlene Murphy. And so that's kind of where we are. So recap, accident 2017, patient loses their life. Nurse immediately reports it, tries to right her wrongs best that she can. She's fired, but does not lose her license. Gets a new job 5 months later, 5 months after that, so late 2018, and a tip comes through saying, this doesn't seem right. Who's the tip? I don't know. That's what an anonymous tip is. State board or state health officials of Tennessee say, what Vanderbilt did with the gag order and the money and whatever and the firing of the nurse, that's perfectly fine for a situation like this. Everybody go about their business. Insert CMS. No. That's not going to happen. Tennessee State Board, you're right. I'm going to file criminal charges, and I'm going to get my slice of the pie in this publicity stunt to show that we crack down harshly on medical professionals when they make a mistake. And then now 2 weeks ago, so early March, middle of March, criminal charges, indicted up to 12 years in prison for Radonda Vaught 5 years later after the accident.
That just creates a pit in my stomach. That's like any nurse's worst fear. First off, killing someone. Second off, being indicted and charged for criminal charges. She could face up to 12 years in prison. Yeah.
So for everybody too, like I said, first time. So this is for sure the first time a nurse has been actually indicted, found guilty of criminal charges for an accident. Straight up accident. There's no other way to put it around. They full-fledged investigation. The details came out. There is no other way to look at this other than it was a straight up medication administration accident. No ill intent, no personal vendetta, harm, or anything like that. Straight up accident. Criminal charges for homicide.
That's insane.
It is insane, because now let's highlight this. There have been dozens of cases of medical professionals, nurses, doctors, surgeons, any other type of healthcare professionals, where they have purposely done things to take someone's life. I mean, one of the most famous cases was another nurse, actually here in Texas, if I'm not mistaken, where she used to administer certain medications or things into children, knowing what she gave, but would do it secretly. So then when it was time for somebody to step in because they went into cardiac arrest, respiratory arrest, or were just decompensating, all of a sudden she'd wait a little bit, and then I had a great idea, let's do this, and it would work. Almost every time. Not every time. Some of the kids, it was a little bit too far and they lost. And I don't remember how many kids died as a result of that, but it was a lot. And that nurse was charged appropriately, and she never saw the light of day again.
And that's rightfully so. And I think everyone can agree, yes, that person, obviously.
Nope.
I'm not even going to say their name because they don't deserve the credit. But that person deserves to be charged criminally, and they deserve to rot in prison.
So there's people like that, and there's other, famous doctor cases too, where they've made TV shows and movies out of it, right?
Right.
That purposely did it, but we're highlighting that because Radonda Vaught was now charged. Now her sentencing is not going to be as significant because, like I said, it looks like the maximum looks is up to 12 years in prison, which is still a really long time. I mean, she's 35 years old. So now we're talking she's going to come out, 12 years later, where she's almost 50.
And then not to mention all the money that she owes.
All the money that she owes. But she got charged. She's getting charged and is facing the same charges with a lessened penalty than those two that we just highlighted that purposely killed people, but dozens of people. I think one of the doctors get like 30, I think it was like 33 deaths he was responsible for on purpose. So I don't know. So let's get into the discussion. I have a lot of thoughts and everything too, but this is going to change the precedence of everything going forward. Right. And on previous episodes too, we had kept talking as we were getting through the pandemic and talking of other topics that we kind of were agreeing that, like, I don't know, like, I really think we're getting into, there's going to be one more thing that is just that it's the tipping point, that things are kind of sitting right here on a nice little balance. Now that we've gone through the pandemic and everything that's come of it with some of the other topics we've touched on, and we were waiting for one more thing that was going to send it over the edge the wrong way. And I think this is it. I really do. Too. Because this is going to change the precedence of how all nurses approach certain care, medication administrations, certain situations. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's be honest, it's going to discourage people from reporting. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, why would you potentially report, other than we took a sworn oath to do it and that is the right thing. But now knowing that, like, you could be charged criminally if somebody really wants to, just to prove a point 5 years later because they made a mistake the first time.
Why would you want to report that?
If nobody, that's what I'm saying. Like, if somebody could sit there and be like, well, if nobody witnessed it, mm-hmm. If I turn myself in, shit, I might be going to jail for the rest of my life.
Yeah, no, it's scaring everyone. Everyone is scared right now. The reason why we report things is, one, I mean, a good-hearted person is going to say, "Oh my God, I made a mistake. This is what I did," because they want to fix it. Nobody shows up to work wanting to hurt someone or kill someone.
Nobody shows up like, I'm going to make 5 mistakes today. I hope 4 of them are all right.
And so the proper thing to do, which is why we say, okay, you have to write an incident report on that, like, another incident report. Like, that's how improvements are made in the hospital. Yeah,
so you can investigate the steps that led to that and see, where can I intervene or where do I need to change something?
How can I keep my patient safe? Yeah, things like that. So
it's crazy. And so when we talk about, I keep saying precedent. So when I talk about precedent, let's talk about one of the first ones. One of the first thing that popped in my head, other than the discouragement to report any wrongdoing that you do, especially if it's unwitnessed. That's different. But the first thing that I thought of was, okay, I work in oncology and transplant. We do have emergent situations. We do override certain things too. Most of the time it's antibiotics, because science has shown us the faster that we can treat fever, neutropenia with antibiotics to protect them, you lowers the risk of sepsis, all kinds of stuff. That's a little bit different than administering vecuronium, Versed, fentanyl, morphine, anything like that. But I have plenty of experience in ER and ICU type management and stuff like that, especially going through grad school now, to where I was like, patient rolls in through the ER, cardiac arrest. They go into a room. There's usually one, at least one, but usually 2, 3, sometimes providers, so doctors or people who can prescribe. So doctors, nurse practitioners, physician's assistant, we'll just leave it at that. And then you have your team of nurses and other healthcare professionals, usually respiratory therapists, right? Everybody knows a role that they're supposed to provide, or they're assigned one, and you start literally saving this person's life, or trying to. It's an emergent situation. So yes, orders do not get put directly into the computer, barcode scanned. This patient just came in. They don't even have an armband. Doctors start spouting out medication orders, different types of cardioversion or resuscitation, electrical resuscitation. And the nurses and the healthcare team do it because it's part of an algorithm study and stuff like that. So in your head, you know what you're doing is safely, because we've learned that, yes, these are the standard doses, or you have a sheet that you refer to based off of the weight of the patient, but you're doing all this thing in the matter of minutes to, we don't want to say hours, but minutes. And then at the end of it, you go back and make sure everything's documented. So yeah, you have somebody that scribes and make sure that they're trying their best to record every single thing, every dose that's administered, at what time it was administered, so you can go back and put that in that record.
Right.
Now, how many nurses are going to sit there in that situation because of this instance and be like, no, I ain't doing anything until I can prove it every step of the way that I had to on time of when I did it. Hey, give 1 milligram of epinephrine. Nope, put it in the computer so I can scan it. Get me a patient barcode so I can verify who this patient is.
What a delay.
That's the first thing that popped in my head. I was like, and what are you going to do? You got to penalize a nurse or a healthcare professional for doing that, for now doing everything the right way every single time, even though it's been commonplace to override and to do things like that in emergent situations. I think things will change from that instance.
Yeah, I agree, because everyone's going to want to protect themselves now, because the hospital is supposed to have your back in a sense that, yes, you're supposed to go through all these safety checks too. And so you think that, okay, well, I reported it to my nurse manager and they said not to scan it in. Well, I mean, where's the nurse manager now who told her not to write that up and not to scan that med in? You know what I'm saying? Well, she did everything that she was supposed to correctly after administering that medication.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to vouch for her, saying that, what she did was fine. I mean, obviously it's not fine. She killed someone. It was but that's, to me, that's almost punishment enough, knowing that you killed someone, and what she very much felt bad about, and came out publicly saying how horrible she felt about it, talked to the family about it. But it's how she was treated after, and being dragged through the mud for potentially 5 years after this event, that I would even want to be a nurse anymore and report something, because they're thinking that could happen to me. Yeah.
No, that's the thing. So that's the other precedence. Then it comes to like, okay, well, if they're not going to be a nurse or a respiratory therapist or anybody that's going to do it, we'll find somebody else. No, you won't. I mean, and if you do find somebody that is willing to take that job to go around what now are deemed loopholes, that's probably not somebody that you weren't working in that position, to be honest with you. The other precedent, the first thing that came to my mind is like, wow, okay, how many times have I quickly jumped at helping a coworker do something because they're tied up somewhere else?
Yes.
Now, in my area and your area, it's a little bit different because our ratios are a little bit smaller in pediatrics in general, but in oncology and ICU, our assignments, are usually, because it's more critical, you're not super busy, but also too, those patients are there longer, you get to know them. So you always kind of have an idea of what's going on with somebody else's patients because you probably had them the day before, or you just know. So you're not kind of going in there blind-eyed and bushy-tailed. However, in the adult world, where you're on some of these floors where your ratio is 6 patients to 1 nurse, ever-changing, revolving door, it might be a completely new set of patients from the day before, I might necessarily be super quick to kind of jump and be like, yeah, I'll go give that for you. I don't know who this patient is, why they're here, what they're getting this medication for. I know the medication, but like, why are they getting it? What's their indication? So now it's okay. So now the option is I'm fully going to make sure that I check and look into this. Okay, well, what if it becomes a situation where it needed to be given 5 minutes ago, and now you're still 10 minutes away from giving it because you want to make sure you review like why this is. I think patient care is going to suffer. I think nurses are going to be more hesitant. I think nurses are also going to be a lot more diligent than we already are. And unfortunately, I think patient safety is going to be affected, not because I think nurses will be overly safe, but I think it'll be affected because it'll take longer to get to things.
Patient safety is going to decline for sure.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right about that, because in an emergent situation, what you said, it was like your first precedent, your first point that you made was you're in an emergent situation and you don't want to go grab the Ativan, or you don't want to give the epi because you're like, nope, put it in the EMR.
Yeah.
And I want pharmacy to verify it.
Yep.
And then I'll give it.
Yep.
Because everyone's so scared of what's going to happen. It's like, what if you give the med and then they have an allergic reaction to it or something?
Mm-hmm.
And just all these things that are going to be going through your mind now.
Yep. No, it's interesting. It's huge. And I really think this is the incident that we're going to look back and say that this was the final tipping point over the last 3 years that's really going to put it there. Cause we've
already I really feel like nurses, respiratory therapists, bedside caregivers have been drugged through the mud with COVID as it is. Overworked, underpaid, mental health declining, not enough resources to care for ourselves. And now this. Yeah.
And and the biggest thing that I took away from this too is because did Radonda Vaught deserve some type of punishment? Absolutely. She made a mistake. Patient lost her life. She should never be able to be a nurse again, have an active license in any state, all 50 states, no active nurse's license. She should not be able to pursue any other type of medical profession in general, which pretty much comes with the medical. You basically get blacklisted initially. So she's blacklisted. It's fine. Any more punishment on top of that? I don't know. She's probably got so much self-punishment on top of herself that it's not even funny, right? You get into this profession because you want to save people, and one of your mistakes just killed somebody. So we want to talk about the guilt there, and it's never going to bring no type of punishment is going to bring that patient back to that family. But now, I don't know. Radonda Vaught is facing up to 12 years in prison for a mistake that she immediately reported, felt extremely horrible about, and tried to right all of those wrongs. She did everything right other than gave the wrong medication that resulted in death. So that in itself is enough. Death. But she's the only one that's punished.
Right. And that's where I'm pissed.
She's the only one that's getting punished in this.
Why isn't Vanderbilt getting tried? Why aren't any charges getting fired against Vanderbilt? Which, by the way, the prosecutor used to be a law professor at Vanderbilt University.
Yeah. Well, I don't.
And it's kind of like, is it because that CMS was threatening to pull their funding that now they want to try her and prosecute her because CMS wanted more from the situation? And so they're saying, oh, here's what we're doing for the situation. We're going to try this nurse criminally. Yeah.
Well, there's no way. They can say whatever they want to, but there's no other way than it's viewed by the public is somebody called you out for messing up the first time. And so now you're like, well, I've got to come back with a vengeance to try to make this right. So everybody's like, oh, no, they ended up making it right. Everything's good. And just completely blowing over the fact of what they did initially over the first year to 2 years. And 2 weeks from verdict, I believe now as of today or somewhere, or just about, I think tomorrow, I think is 2 weeks from when they actually found her guilty. I have yet to see anybody talk about what was Vanderbilt's role in this incident, other than they were changing over a electronic health record that takes some time. There's always glitches in technology. They were doing the best they could to try to get it rolled out. It's a large healthcare system, tons of buildings, tons of computers. What else did you want them to do? They put in process things that they told their nurses and healthcare professionals to do that was safe to do it. This nurse just didn't pay attention. She did that. And that's what they did. They kept pounding at the fact that it's all on her. Mm-hmm. She should have paid closer attention. She should have known what she was giving. I guarantee you Radonda Vaught knew what she was giving. I guarantee you, if you asked her, what is Versed, what does it do, and what are you watching for? Recite it like a book. Vecuronium, recite it like a book. Did she pull the wrong medication? Yes. Was the system set up to help her fail in that situation? When she's orienting a new grad, she's running all over the hospital to help everybody and anybody. She was on her way somewhere else, got called to this emergent situation to go up to another floor, pull a Pyxis that wasn't working, and take it all the way back down. Did the system set her up to fail? 110%. The system set her up to fail and make a fatal mistake like this. That is 100% her responsibility, but it is the responsibility of Vanderbilt's hospital system that they had created a culture over the course of a year that now this was okay to do.
And it was common.
Yeah.
It was just, it's just override. It was so common. It's like muscle memory. And you know why everyone's like, well, she ignored all the warning signs. You know how many times you're just, especially like you said, 21 days to create a habit. Yeah. You're like, okay, warning sign, warning sign, warning sign. It's called alarm fatigue. When you listen to nurses, it's been proven that nurses have alarm fatigue,
which is the responsibility still of the nurse.
Yes.
But
and so when they hear the same alarm over and over and over and over again, they can tune it out. And so that's why these processes get changed to keep patients safe. Yeah. They're not doing it because they're annoyed and they don't want to listen to the alarm anymore.
Well, let's take this approach. Mm-hmm. So almost a year into this switch, right? So a year into the switch, I could pull up Google in a millisecond on my phone. Mm-hmm. I can update my phone in a matter of minutes, and all of a sudden I have a completely different operating software on my phone just because I was connected to Wi-Fi. Completely different than updating an entire system-wide network of computers. However, if they did an investigation into this thing, could this have been done a lot faster if they just spent enough money to do it? That they probably had the money to do, but well, let's look at the bottom line. If we just roll this out over the course of a year and a half, and just kind of put in these other processes, we save millions of dollars.
More money in our pocket.
Or we could go ahead and spend a couple additional millions of dollars, get this shit done in a week, so that I don't put my healthcare professionals in situations like this that result in things like this. Now that's speculation. Just it truly is. I'm not saying that's what happened. But we probably will never know because they're not going to investigate the hospital system.
And it's interesting because it's like, why? Why were they not indicted as well? Why wasn't Vanderbilt Medical Center indicted?
Yeah.
Why was it just Radonda Vaught, who had already admitted to fault?
But why is the State Health Board of Tennessee taking the hospital system side versus the nurse who made a mistake and tried to write, reported it immediately? So now a state health board has proven that they are going to always side with the area that their reimbursement and money comes from.
Yep. Money always.
Hi, I'm the State Health Board of Tennessee. Most of my payroll and everything that I come up with rules and regulations to do is try to help Vanderbilt make more money every year. So they give me more kickbacks. Basically, if they just do what I tell them to do, I get money, they get money, we're all good. Oh, I forgot there's about 1,000 people in that hospital at any given time that without them, this place won't function and it'll actually probably fall to the ground. That's the only reason we make money, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to send you to prison for an accident for 12 years. This is where my mind went, and over the course of like 6 hours when I saw the verdict, and I was just like, well,
there it goes.
Yes, it is. Everybody get ready because things are not going to look like this in March of 2023. I can guarantee you that.
Right.
It is. It's crazy, and I know we have some listeners that are in nursing school or finishing up nursing school or just starting nursing school or thinking about it because y'all have reached out to us before and everything like that with questions and that you tune into the episodes. And I'm not trying to discourage you from getting into nursing. I'm still going to do it. I graduate in August and I'll transition into a nurse practitioner. I'm still going to do it because I wouldn't do anything else. But at the same time, like the way that I approach practice over the next few months as a bedside RN, and then especially as I go into an advanced practice provider with more responsibilities and
the ability to prescribe
and credentialing to do certain things, you bet your sweet butt that I'm going to be. Not that I'm not already unbelievably careful, but there is a lot of things that I have to think about here now currently, and we'll think about over the next couple of months of how would I approach certain situation.
I feel like the biggest takeaway that I had from all of this, because my initial reaction, of course, I was just upset. I mean, I was just heartbroken for the family, for the nurse. Just the whole situation is just a tragedy. Mm-hmm. It's just disgusting. And it puts a pit in my stomach, even thinking that could happen to me, because it could happen to any healthcare provider now. I mean, everyone in healthcare is literally Radonda Vaught.
Yeah.
And it makes me sad because, I mean, as of right now, we want you guys, we created this podcast because we wanted to give everybody a voice. We wanted to let y'all write into us, let us know what's bothering you guys, let us know what you think needs to be improved in the healthcare system. But now we want you guys to protect yourselves. It's your nursing license. Mm-hmm. You guys need to be protecting yourselves. Like Luke said, I'll probably be thinking twice before I go do a favor for a coworker now.
Well, it's a big notch, but it's another notch in the belt of proof that when it comes down to something like this happening, most employers, because I'm not going to say all of them, but most employers don't give a shit. If it's you or them, it's always going to be you. Always. Because they see you as replaceable. Mm-hmm. Radonda Vaught's probably an incredible nurse.
Right.
She must be good enough to orient, that people trust her to orient new nurses and to learn and stuff. And people reach out to her to come to help them. Obviously she was trustworthy. She was knowledgeable enough to train. So, I don't know her personally, but I would assume based off of that and what I know and what it takes to be a preceptor and work in the areas that she had worked in, and for people to trust her enough to do something like this, she was probably a really good nurse that people liked.
Especially to be assigned to the help all nurse, which is basically like helping hands. Being assigned to you can literally go to any unit.
Yep.
That's how skilled you are. So you can work on essentially any unit. You can take patients on any unit. And she was running errands that day for those nurses. And so that's how reliable she was. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking a new nurse who didn't understand the drugs or maybe didn't know where something was. Remember, whenever you do give a medication, of course you want to wait with the patient and make sure there's no side effects. But like we said before, she was also en route to go to a swallow study. And this was just a detour. So she was probably already running behind and just thinking in her head, boom, it's given. Mm-hmm. There was a camera on Charlene Murphy. From what I understand was that the room that she was waiting in radiology was, there was just a camera on her, but she wasn't on a cardiac monitor.
But the radiology department has trained medical professionals in the art of resuscitation, stabilization.
For sure. But
that's not an excuse, but she didn't just administer medication and leave a patient just willy-nilly, just all by themselves.
And that's what we're saying is maybe she wasn't on a cardiac monitor, which is shit. Maybe that's where we went wrong. Maybe she should have at least been on a pulse oximeter, something. But she had a camera on her. However, it wasn't monitoring her vital signs. So there's things that, her reporting this, it creates process improvements where they can put new policies into place as to, maybe everyone who I administer needs to be on a pulse ox. Mm-hmm. That's an improvement that could be made. Maybe in radiology, there needs to be a scanner where I can scan the bracelet, scan the EMR with the med given. She was just planning on doing it later.
Yeah. And the one thing that I can't look past and that I think would have stopped this in general is, even though she was going to give it emergently and stuff like that and going to scan it later, both of those medications require somebody to physically put their identification credentials into that computer when you do scan it. And you are taught, even if you're going to give it in an emergent situation like this and witness later, you need to find that person that's going to be that witness, let them visibly put eyes on the medication, one, that you pulled, two, the dose that you pulled up, that it is appropriate, so that when you come back, they can wish it. And from my understanding, she didn't. The person just they were like, yeah, it's good. No, you're pulling for said. I trust you that you're pulling for said. I know that's what you're going to give because that's what's ordered. When you come back, we'll take care of it. And never visibly said, hey, just let me check the vial that's in your hand. Mm-hmm. Because right then and there, if that person is like, oh, hey, whoa, you pulled Vecuronium. Was that in the wrong bin? Did they load it somewhere? What's going on? Oh, snap. You're right. Crap. That would have been bad. Mm-hmm. So that's the only thing where I'm sitting here and I'm like, I get how it happened. because I've seen that, I've been through it and stuff like that, but I don't know. And maybe it's just one of those things where, for a split second, she was like, it'll be fine. We'll take care of it later. Or, and I've had these instances as a preceptor too, where it's like, oh, well, I've got my preceptor. They'll be my second set of eyes. That's a slippery slope. Because one, I mean, like you said, your preceptor 8 weeks into it sounds super great. Like they're on top of it. They're starting to learn, but at the same time,
however, I'm getting another
and you're also taught, and every system's different, but we're always taught too that like, even once you get towards the end of somebody's orientation, like you should never be the second witness of your preceptee, and your preceptee should never be the second witness of you. You should always still call in that extra nurse, because that's just how it should be, because essentially you and your preceptor are one and the same person while you're on orientation. So you shouldn't be witnessing and signing off on each other's things. But
exactly.
I don't know. It's sad. It makes me really, really sad. Makes me scared. Makes me nervous, anxious, all of the things. But it's, I don't know. I just don't see how things are ever the same, and I don't see how things don't get worse from here. I really don't.
I agree in the sense that she should be fired. I agree that she should not be allowed to practice nursing again.
Mm-hmm.
Once you kill someone, like, that's it.
Yeah. Oh, that's it.
That's it. I'm sorry. You don't get a second chance for coming back and killing someone. You just don't. You don't get to redeem yourself. However, to be criminally charged and dragged through the mud for 5 years and to be posted publicly nationwide.
Well, this is healthcare's 21st century, 2022, 21st century Salem witch trial. That's what it was.
This isn't justice. The family doesn't even want her criminally charged. This isn't justice, and that's what it's all about: is getting justice for that crime. Mm-hmm. And that's what it is too. Did Radonda Vaught commit a crime? Well,
the family didn't even want to pursue charges.
No, absolutely not.
I'm not saying that they weren't sad, but initially, the report is out there that when it initially happened and it was explored, the family didn't want to press charges. Mm-hmm. From what they received from Radonda Vaught in conversation of remorse and everything like that, they said they had forgiven her for the mistake, awful mistake that the family will be dealing with for the rest of their life. Mm-hmm. But from what they got from their interaction with Radonda, they knew that was probably going to be the last time that ever happened to that nurse. Now, and they weren't wrong, because that nurse should never ever be able to do something like that. But from my takeaway from interpreting the report is what they got in that conversation from her was that, like, I don't like this. This will never happen to another family, because she's crushed. Mm-hmm. She's crushed. And so they didn't even pursue their own, chart. And so it's just, I don't know. There's just no other way to look at it other than like, oh, we made a mistake initially, and so now we're going to burn her at the stake for it because somebody called out on our, incompetence of due diligence at the first time. And
mistakes happen a lot, guys. And I don't want anyone to sit here and think, well, you've never been a part of a medical error. Like, my dad was almost killed by another nurse in a hospital.
Well, and it just goes back to this thing.
We're familiar with it.
Yeah, and let's just go all back to this thing. The big thing right now, like, anybody listening to this podcast too is super familiar with, like, Nurse Blake. He's doing some incredible things all over the country of putting together these rallies to start to basically put so much pressure on Congress to pass federally mandated staffing ratios that if they don't do it,
they're going to look like assholes.
Yeah.
They're going to look like
if they don't do it, yes. Because and it's not just him, and there's people all over the country, but like this is one of the things where an accident like this with Radonda potentially doesn't happen if there's mandated safe. If they put us as nurses, respiratory therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, you name it, in proper situations for us to be able to adequately and safely provide all of the expectations they expect of us without mistake. How's that going to happen? Stop making us take care of so many patients because you refuse to pay that extra person to alleviate that, or to pay the good nurses appropriately for the work that they do and the training that they continue to encompass and continue to make themselves better and retain them. because you want to know how other accidents happen. You let the good nurses go and you fill them right back in with the new grads that don't know anything. And that's not that they're bad nurses. They just don't know. You're willing to let go of somebody who's been there for 20 years, has seen pretty much anything there is to do, and they ask you for more money because they've earned it. You say no, and you pay somebody who's just fresh out of school who hasn't seen shit. Things are going to happen like this. Patients will be harmed. Patients will lose their life, and it won't be on purpose. It'll be purely by accident. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
And then it's like at that point, all these accidents happening. I mean, are we just going to be criminally charging all of these nurses that are making these mistakes? Like,
the precedent's been set now. So it's like, okay, so the next time that this happens or something, closely similar to it, do they get charged criminally? I mean, you've already proven that an accident and the loss of life, which is horrible, is means for criminal homicide, which I can't recite the specific definition of it, but I've watched and been witness to enough things to where I would assume if you looked at the official definition of criminal homicide, the word malicious intent is probably in there. You have the intent to take the life, to be criminally charged with homicide, murder in the first degree, second degree, third. Like, I mean, drunk driving, which is horrible, most of the time get charged with accidental manslaughter because there was no intent in doing it, but you ingested a substance that impairs your ability to drive a vehicle, which is federally illegal, and you took the life of somebody. Some of those people get charged with accidental manslaughter. And
they're serving less jail time than
but they committed a crime before even losing the life. Getting behind the wheel of a car drunk or under any influence of alcohol is a federal crime in itself. And now you've taken a life incidentally, but you still did. Radonda Vaught didn't violate a law. She didn't break a law.
There was no intent. And that's where the charges come in that I just do not agree with.
Yeah.
And Vanderbilt throwing her under the bus. Who the hell wants to work for Vanderbilt now? Don't get a job at Vanderbilt.
I'm interested to see if there's anything that comes out of that too. Like how many people will potentially leave over the course of the next few months, or if they're, hiring numbers go drastically down, or applicants for certain positions that withdrew immediately after this. I don't know. It
raises a lot of questions. It opens a lot of doors that I don't need to be open.
And the Vanderbilt health system's incredible. I mean, they have a lot of research institutions that lead to huge advances in the form of healthcare, especially in children and everything too. But they don't have that without the people that are carrying out those resources. I hate to break it to you, but Mr. I've signed my name on your paycheck. They don't do anything that advances healthcare medicine other than pay, which is important. Everybody's entitled to their compensation for the work they do, but you're now penalizing the people that make you that world-renowned institution that people want to come and learn and train at and make better. You just, I don't know. You just steam plowed right through one of them. So,
I would say the biggest takeaway, and I want to hear yours, Luke. I want to hear your number one takeaway, but I would say that my biggest takeaway that I had from all this is just protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Protect yourself, protect your license. It's you looking out for you. Mm-hmm. Before you do a favor for a coworker, make sure that you know clearly what they want from you. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that, go get me another med or anything like that, but just anything in general. If you're watching out for someone else's kids while they're going to lunch, make sure you know what drugs that they're on. If you have an issue, call that nurse back immediately and say, hey, are you going to be in the break room? Where can I reach you at? If I have a question, always clarify everything. Mm-hmm. Always, 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 always look out for yourself. Yeah. Because you are the only thing. You guys worked really hard for your nursing license. Don't let it get taken away. And she could potentially go to prison for 12 years.
Yeah. Intense.
And, that patient lost their life. That family lost their family member.
Yeah.
Just make sure you guys are being careful with everything that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's great. I would say that would be my biggest takeaway too, but to have something else. I think, right up there with me at 1B, that's 1A. This 1B is, I think emergent situations are they're done. They're done in the way that we know them and how they function. And I think things will drastically change over the course of the next year to 2 years to 3 years, however long. But I think the way that we view emergent situations and how we administer modalities and interventions and medications in those emergent situations are forever changed. It's forever changed, plain and simple. I think so go the days of straight up, specifically just like this, the pre-medicating for certain scans that aren't necessarily like, was it medically necessary for her to receive this medication to get a PET scan? No, it does not do anything other than hopefully help take the edge off, relieve the anxiety of the claustrophobia, for her to stay still enough to get a good scan. They can still scan her with her moving. Maybe not going to be necessarily accurate. They might miss something because the scans aren't perfect, but it was not medically necessary to get the PET scan. Whereas the contrast that you get for the PET scan, that's medically necessary because that's what gives you the scan. That's what you have to have that. So two different ways to look at it. So I think now, especially that, because the other thing is our hospital is going to start now spending the money to properly outfit radiology departments with specific types of technology to monitor patients full go. Because the thing is if you got a patient going down for an MRI, a magnetic resonance imaging that needs constant monitoring, it changes because most of our electrodes have metal in it. Mm-hmm. It's a big giant magnet. Can't have any metal on you at all. So are we going to start developing and spend the money to have full-blown plastic and rubber type devices that have no metal at all, or somehow we can shield them from that giant magnet to where it doesn't create any patient harm? Because that patient, if I got to give that patient Versed so that they can get through an MRI, which sometimes can take an hour to 2 hours, and they're not going to be able to lay still, nope, I'm going to keep them on a cardiac monitor. I'm going to have them on a pulse ox. You need to find a way to safely keep me in that room, like not for an MRI because this could still be safe, but CT or long-term x-ray with a lot of radiation. You got to find a way to better protect me than a lead vest, because I ain't leaving that side of that CT scanner if you got to keep them in there for 30 minutes and you need me to do something. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. It's very, very interesting. And the other thing is I guarantee you they did not expect this to get the national attention that it did, especially after the pandemic, right? It's delayed for almost 3 years. And then all of a sudden it was like, all right, let's jump back into court and get this done before it gains national attention. Wrong. I really do. I really think that when they picked this back up 3 years later with everything else that's going on in the world, I really think that they thought it was going to just slide right through those Tennessee courts. Verdict was going to happen. There'd be a little bit of commotion about it around the region, maybe nationally, but I don't think they expected this. But at the same time, too, I think the reason that it got the attention that it did is because they've done pissed off healthcare workers for too long over the last couple of years now. That's what actually rallied behind this, was a lot of those nurses and healthcare professionals that now all they do is they've either left bedside or something like that, or they're still doing it, but they've put 70% of their attention into just ear to the ground, what's going on everywhere, and then let me just blow it the hell up via social media, my following, influencing, whatever it is. And I'm going to bring it to light until now all of a sudden it is wildfire, because this spread like wildfire. Oh, yeah. Everywhere. I mean, I had people messaging me that weren't healthcare professionals, be like, "Did you see the Radonda Vaught case?" Oh, yeah, I saw it. Trust me, I saw it. Wildfire. So it's interesting. So
we just wanted to bring some light to the situation, clarify anything. If you guys had questions, a couple of y'all wrote in some questions, which were great. We really appreciate it. We hope we clarified those during the podcast. But we really miss you guys. Really happy to be back. Yeah. And I'm sorry that we have to come back with such a sad story, but hopefully the feel-good moments helped at the very beginning.
Yeah, fun feel-good moments. So, but hopefully get back into a routine, can, get more back on our roll that we were on with episodes and coming out and stuff, now that both of us kind of back settled and moving forward. Obviously life doesn't stop or slow down, but it should be a little bit easier to kind of get back into a momentum and stuff like that too. So same as always, send us topics you want to talk about, things that come up. Of course, something like this, as updates come out or whatever, we'll try to make sure to touch on it, just to continue to follow along, and anything else, else obviously that comes up within our world of healthcare and everything. But send topics, questions. I know graduation's coming up for a whole bunch of new baby nurses here in the next couple months, and other members, from grad school and other types of health professions and stuff like that over the course. May and August are always big months. Summer grads, spring grads, stuff like that. And then there's some people geared up that just applied, waiting to hear back that they got into nursing school, and hopefully starting in the fall. So yeah, good time of year. The weather's getting better all over the country. Sun's coming out. Beautiful day here in Texas for us. But yeah, guys, we're happy to be back. Let us know anything we can do for you, answer, or talk about. That's why we're always here. So
we miss you guys. We love y'all.
Yep.
And we'll see you next time.
Yep. Peace. Follow us on Instagram at alertandorientedrn, and email us at alertandorientedrn@gmail.com. That's alert, AND, orientedrn@gmail.com. See you next episode.